In her new book titled Being Other, The Beauty and Power of Being an Outsider, Moroccan social entrepreneur and writer Hanae Bezad shares lessons from her lived experiences as a woman, an Arab, a Muslim, and an African. Through this journey, Hannah intertwines her personal narrative with the tales of other inspirational women, collectively shining a light on how racism, misogyny, and deep-rooted power dynamics can be confronted and transformed. Hannah tells me that she wants the book to serve as a beacon for Black entrepreneurs, indigenous, and women of color, encouraging them to reclaim their otherness as a source of creative power so they can achieve the success that they deserve.
Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today. It's good to see you. I think the last time we spoke, you were in Spain or Portugal or Rabat.
Yes,
You just
Portugal.
like everywhere. In New York, you have been traversing the world ever since I met you since 2017.
Oh
You
yes.
are on
Oh
the
yes.
go. I don't
It's
know anybody
so
who has traveled as many places as you have. But it's good to see you. Thank you so much. Let me turn up my volume here. What motivated you to write the book, and how did your personal experiences shape the narrative?
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be back with you in conversation, Jackson, and to talk about this book, Being Other, The Beauty and Power of Being an Outsider, which was published in October 2023, and which eventually I had the honor to present in many places across the globe, and just yesterday in a conversation here in Montreal. Back to the origins of the book. Well, let's say back in 2021, it was a moment of transition for me. I had stepped out of my role in the Pan-African organization. I was still very much involved in the hub that I created in Morocco, still in kind of making sure that it would be consolidated. And at the same time, I realized I had been in connection with so many incredible female entrepreneurs, change makers on the African continent, and also in other places around the globe, mostly North America, people from minority groups. And we shared experiences in our respective journeys and kind of realized that there was a lot of echoing one another's experience. And at the same time, for me, it was a moment of integrating all the learnings and kind of also healing some of the wounding, some of the frictions that kind of that the challenges made me come across in my entrepreneurial journey and my journey as a whole, as a expatriate immigrant in France, where I started my career, a repatriate entrepreneur in Morocco, an expatriate in Rwanda, where I lived. And in different shapes and forms, kind of realizing that some of the challenges that I came across, and it was my role also to kind of challenge them as a change maker, some of them were, were really disguised in something really deeper, more complicated, more convoluted. And at the time, there was more and more research being produced by knowledge production centers, say, companies like McKinsey and so on the specific challenges of women of color in the workplace. So at that point, I started to, make sense of a number of experiences that I've had. So connecting all the experiences that I had documented for myself. I was writing post stories. I had tons of notes and those reports and this data and this research. And then I wanted to write a book about those experiences, but also how do we overcome them? How do we transform them? And tapping into my own personal journey, of course, because that was the one that I had most access to, and developing tools. So from that point, I wanted to create, yes, kind of a sort of a platform that would take the form of a nonfiction essay to give hope and strategy for the next generations. And I must say at the beginning, it was very much academic. And then eventually with the work and the conversations, specifically with my editors, we came back to a place that is more vulnerable and more powerful at the same time. So my own voice in it. So, and those of many other women in this book. Yeah, so it's a little bit of the story of being other, and the theory of change in it is that if we really want change, and we're talking about solving the world's greatest challenges when it comes to climate change, access to education, access to health, social equity, and so on and so forth, peacemaking also, then we need to tap into the knowledge that is vast and and deep-rooted of women of color, Black, Indigenous, and women of color,
right.
Specifically those that have done their inner work to be able to push the needle in tech.
Racism to misogyny, and you know, these deep-rooted power dynamics in workplaces, and how you overcame them.
Well, like I said, I started my career in France, and I had graduated from top schools in France. I started my career as a consultant and also a sort of like elite environment. And it just so happened that soon after I started my career, the Bataclan attacks happened in France. And so that very critical time has seen a number of the rise of Islamophobia and overtly expressed racism that I wasn't necessarily immediately a recipient of, although at times I was, even from my closest circle, which was really hurtful. And I share some of those experiences where one of my very good friends is inviting me to a party and I'm the only, well, North African in the room, but she opens the door and she's like, hey guys, I brought an Arab. And that's just after the Bataclan attacks. And that really put me in a place where I was completely uneasy and sometimes feeling tokenized and definitely not fully embraced and respected in everything that I was, you know, that is part of me and my identity components. But also it's things that are more tangible, as in you're going to be assigned because managers see the ambition, the skills, but you're going to be assigned to the most challenging assignments, and then eventually you're not going to receive the adequate compensation for it.
The credit and the compensation.
Yes, exactly. Right. And so that happened in France. When I returned in Morocco, well, in that case, I was an entrepreneur, but there were questions around access to public funding to be able to offer the training, the top-notch training that I had been bringing. And then in the case of Morocco, it was a context of we had an Islamist government. And so that trickled down into the way people in the public administration treated citizens. Yes. Yeah. And then I would be, you know, showing up with this beautiful project to have a funding for people that are unemployed to be trained in coding. And then I would be told by this woman that the connection, you know, she just doesn't like it, the connection, because I would be embodying something that she was uncomfortable with. She was an Islamist, conservative woman. And I was someone who had been trained in Europe and was very free in my demeanor and my expression and so on. An entrepreneur, so very much at odds. Or so that's one situation. Or another public funding for, in that case, specifically innovation ecosystems. And I had received an assessment of the case that I was bringing, so the first North African coding bootcamp, and I had the lowest points on so-called experience because I was 28 years old and I had been the manager of the company for 1 year. And at that point, it felt like this is completely absurd because obviously when you speak with startups, then they're going to have such setup. They're going to have potentially young leaders and potentially just 1 year of experience. And that shouldn't be part of the grid. But behind that, there was also a sense of, you know, this little human being coming back so freshly. Well, it doesn't have value. On the other side, the funding was given to programs that had no substance and to people that mismanaged even their company. They hadn't paid their bills, but they were men. They were
most
older,
likely men,
exactly, and their name resonated. And so I was vastly disappointed in such situations. And so.
Yeah. Okay, so how did these experiences shape your sense of, I guess, dignity or self-worth or even self-love?
Yes. Well, I must say, you know, whenever I started my career as an entrepreneur, I was also taking a number of risks on a personal level, as in returning to Morocco that I had always been loving from the bottom of my heart, but then also aware that the society was at times adverse. And especially after my father's passing away, a number of conversations around heritage and so on. And so this context that sometimes gives you, you know, you always have to be a fighter to just have access to minimum rights. So when I made the decision to return to Morocco, I also made the decision to face my own monsters in order to heal. And so that took me a lot of inner work. And I explored different modalities with it in order to really be able to not carry the wounds that are also transgenerational and some of the fears that are transgenerational when it comes also to having a public position, having managing your own team and so on, and also managing the dissonance between being well, a sought after young emerging leader, and because I'm bringing a number of ventures to life and so on, and at the same time this context where if I had to be a witness, for instance, for whatever other situation, my voice would be half of that of a man, because legally it's still the case. Right. So I did a lot of work in that sense. Also, my stay in Rwanda was very interesting in that journey, because obviously I connected with colleagues and an environment in a country that at large is healing and has a specific understanding of what it means to be healing the collective. And so that also fueled my journey and my thought process and my own kind of coming back to self and to my gifts and adjusting and also adapting and connecting with other people that were on their own journey. And of course, this journey is endless, but eventually over time, I think I grew something that I hadn't learned in those elite schools, which is a sense of, yes, self-dignity, self-love, self-worth. And I think this is fundamental to be able to thrive in general and to particularly move with integrity and with clarity and with nia, as we say in Moroccan Arabic, as in with sincerity of intention in the workplace.
Oh, I love that. All right, so let's get into some of the stories that you highlight in your book of other inspirational women. What are some of the lessons that they offer, and how did their experiences influence your own journey and the writing of this book?
So in preparing for this book, I ran a number of interviews just to have an additional formal material on top of the many conversations that I've had over time. But I can share a little bit of such conversations. One of them with Yemi Carey, who's a famous Nigerian business angel. She's worked also with the government, and she shared how, you know, she in her perspective, and because she grew up also with boys, she never felt less than. But then she also understood in her professional journey that she had to kind of double down at times in terms of her own kind of engagement to be able to be respected as much. And what she shared also in terms of tips and advice, and I think this was crucial because it was a time where I was considering board positions. I was invited to board positions and needing to assess whether it made sense. She said, you know, never play the game of being potentially tokenized, because you really need to be channeling your energy, right? You need to be sitting at tables where it's going to matter. And sometimes, you know, this is true for many professionals, especially at certain stages, you know, if organizations have a shallow understanding, superficial understanding of the value of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, you definitely don't want to be part of them. And so knowing how to choose where you engage and how you channel your energy is fundamental. In this book, I also share some of the conversation that I've had with Ray Shu, and she's American Chinese. She talks about the experience of being invisible that's very much part of the Asian experience in North America, and the work that she's been doing in her journey as a creative herself, but also working with change makers and bringing energy work into as an offering and as a support for those change makers. So now she's a Reiki master. She's received that training from other people, so on. And I very much appreciate the journey also to transform those experiences where we feel less than and we feel not seen, because that's the very opposite of love, actually. Love starts with seeing, right? So seeing one another, connecting, and then being able to transmit as a respect and appreciation and on such terms. So Ray Shu is one of them. Ana Barreto, who does amazing work in Brazil with marginalized communities in the favelas, also shared how being mixed growing up in Brazil at the time where the conversation was not as advanced now in terms of the celebration of this diversity was also a challenge. And interestingly, the evolution of the context in the US and Black Lives Matter, and for her working for a Black-led company was very much liberating, was very much empowering. And then Sepide Nasiri, for instance, who's Iranian American, who to kind of transform her own experience of being slightly isolated when she moved to the US, created that platform for other women in tech from the Swana region, Southwest Asia, North Africa. And I think these models are beautiful because we can see, you know, at the same time, the need and necessity to develop that fine grids of being able to, as you know with whom you're talking, know how to engage, so that you feel in your power and you feel aligned with your values, and at the same time create something more, create community of care, create possibilities, channel resources. And for me, this book is one of such platforms. It allows for many such conversations that are sometimes difficult and always beautiful, always very sincere. And it's also the theory of change of a venture that I'm launching in 2025. I'm launching a program to support Black, Indigenous, and women of color founders in health, climate, and education. And really to tapping into that expertise so we can make a lot more of what we have now.
Right. So you've lived different experiences. You have these diverse identities as a woman, as an Arab, as a Muslim, as an African. How have they contributed to your approach to entrepreneurship in the tech industry? And what would you say are some of the unique perspectives that you believe women of color bring to these tech and entrepreneurial spaces?
The way I see tech and the development of technology is a tool. It's a tool for progress. And so it has to embrace, understand deeply. We have to design for tech for good. That's the main value that I see in tech. I get excited about projects that have embedded in them collective intelligence, that have been approaching and understanding challenges of communities, and that have this level of ambition. Ever since I got trained in coding, and I remember back then, some of my peers getting super excited about this or that travel app or whatever else. Well, it solves a problem, surely, and it's probably marketable and it's probably a market, but we need to go a lot deeper and much more. That's what I'm bringing. That's what I've seen other women of color bringing, and that's my hope and aspiration, that we make such technological progress and brain power for good use. Right now, for instance, in addition to Integritas, I'm involved in a number of other projects that are AI powered. We're co-developing an AI-powered tool for sexual and reproductive health that's in prototype phase in South Africa. I'm helping a wonderful group of people from Amrita Puri University in India on their gender AI hackathon. This is the kind of tech that I am 100% in.
I guess finally, I wanted to ask you the kind of advice you would have given to yourself as a young woman about 5-10 years ago, as you were striving to succeed in these environments where you felt like an outsider, and what advice you would give to young women again on how they can harness their unique experiences and perspectives as strength in this professional field.
A lot of these advices are here, but let me just maybe share a few. Always seek respect and love in yourself and other people. I go by this mantra from Khalil Gibran: work is love made visible. And we humans are on a journey to understand what it means to love one another in the most beautiful, elevating ways. And I think we need to have the courage to bring that vocabulary into organizations, particularly organizations that are claiming to be change making. And so that would be particularly it. So what is it that it feels right? And so who am I, the environments that are most enabling, what can I do to make them enabling as well? Because the idea is also not to drop anytime there's a challenge. You know, I think it's a matter of perseverance as well, of clear vision, of creating communities of trust and care. Like I said, I think the people that are thriving in the world are also people that have had access to really good advice. And that's immense capital. The other thing that I would tell myself 10 years ago and that I started to do a lot more consciously is physical and mental health is wealth, clearly. And so I think we, you know, sometimes when we're in ambitious and we're, you know, typically in my case, I've gone to certain schools and there's a competition and so on, we may neglect this aspect. And I think the body has so much knowledge, we can tap into it. Our role is also kind of to untap the multiple possibilities from there. Always seek the flow and find your flow and flow.
Find your energy.
Yes.
So flow with the current or against the current?
Just flow. I mean, sometimes tides are complicated. And it's a matter, you know, it can be different situations, but it's the inner flow is as in, you know, that you are doing what is right.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the flow.
Should you seek spaces where your energies align?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that something you do consciously?
Absolutely, 100%. You know, joy is a powerful enabler and game of itself. Joy is and to bring joy, it means humor, it means beautiful relationship, authentic relating. It means also rest. It means a number of other activities that you know, right now I'm an author and I also sometimes I'm a vocalist and doing music, dancing and so on. Perhaps is not, you know, but if you look by those standards, not the one thing that I would put on my resume as in what enables my progress in my career or is income generating. However, it makes me feel alive, right? And so vitality is also an immense capital to grow.
So finding outlets, and I think most people that I've spoken to, like yourself, always say, you know, find those things that you're passionate about that are not necessarily part of your professional work, and just let them be your outlet or your pressure valve on life.
Yes, and I think particularly, again, for women of color, we come from cultures that are so rich in music, arts, creativity, that I think it's our utmost responsibility as change makers to honor them and advance.
Hannah, always a beautiful conversation chatting with you. As we say, shukran.
Shukran ala wajib. Thank you so much.